Everybody, it's Wednesday, March 3rd, 2010. Thanks for stopping by. I would like to talk to you today about something that recently happened, which may not be getting the interpretation and the attention that it really deserves. And I'm not talking about the murder of innocent people by the anti-Semite who marched into the Holocaust Museum with a rifle and started gunning people down. I'm not really talking about that, although I would like to remind you of that and remind you of the fact that he was defended on national television to a certain extent, and there were people who commented on that who refused to call him a terrorist. And we can speculate as to the reason why. Personally, I believe it's because he was a white Christian. He was an American and a white Christian. So therefore, it's very difficult to call someone like that a terrorist if you are a extreme right-wing operative or an extreme right-wing commentator, like Liz Cheney, for instance. She said, let's not call this man a terrorist. Let's not go that far. He just murdered several innocent people in the Holocaust Museum. So I'd like to remind you of that real quickly. Now, another thing I want to tell you is that, or the main thing I want to tell you is that here in America we have had our first, or at least the first that I know of, suicide bombing. And this is very interesting to me because not only because people frequently allege that only Muslims have been guilty of this, which obviously is not true, but also because suicide bombing is a common response to military occupation. So it begs the question, was the suicide bomber feeling as if he was being occupied by some foreign power? Now, the suicide bomber, he had trouble with the IRS, and he flew his Cessna aircraft into an IRS building and killed one person. And what was really shocking to me is that when they questioned a particular Republican lawmaker about the incident, he refused to condemn it. That's right, he refused to condemn the act. Now, that is shocking. Could you imagine him refusing to condemn a Hamas suicide bomber in Israel? And now, think about the difference between the suicide bombers in Israel and the occupied territories and this man who flew his airplane into a building and killed a person because he had tax troubles. Now, it seems to me that if you grew up under occupation and you are humiliated every day, when you watch your friends and relatives being humiliated, when you watch your parents being beaten for no reason, when you perhaps see a loved one being murdered by the occupying forces, which most suicide bombers have. I mean, historically, most of the suicide bombers have witnessed the murder of a friend or loved one recently when they decide to commit suicide bombing. And so these people are extremely oppressed, extremely, they feel extremely helpless and hopeless, and they really want to end their lives in order to end their pain and also to get revenge. That does not make it okay to do so. It does not make it okay to kill other people who are totally innocent of, that oppression. I mean, you could make the argument that Israeli civilians are in some sense culpable for the oppression because they support it. Because they voted for Ariel Sharon, maybe, or because they give support to the policies of Israel verbally and physically, which enable this oppression. But you can't say that those people are personally involved. And they're not combatants. They're not people who have taken up arms. They're mostly women and children. And women and children, even if they support the government, can't really be held responsible for what the government does. I'm sorry, you can't do that. You can't hold a person responsible for the occupation if they're a woman or a child or a man who has no idea, first of all, what's really going on, doesn't really understand the level of oppression that they are supporting. To them, they're the good guys. What the government is doing is the only thing that it could do. And when you kill those people, that's collective punishment. And you're not punishing the people who are responsible for the actual oppression. You're killing innocent bystanders who happen to mistakenly believe that the oppression is justified. Okay, so that's my take on it, and that's why I don't support those things. I don't try to justify those things. I try to give a little background and say, okay, look, even the criminals are human beings, and if you want to understand why they did those things, you probably should understand a little bit about their life. And what's puzzling to me is the fact that an American who grew up in a land of unprecedented prosperity, someone who owned a light aircraft, who undoubtedly had plenty of money. I mean, you cannot own an aircraft and operate it unless you have plenty of material resources at your disposal. It's just not possible. It's a very expensive hobby. Now, how could somebody like that turn around and become a suicide bomber? That's what he did. Now, nobody's going to say that. Nobody's going to put that label on it, but that's what it was. He intentionally killed himself in order to kill employees of the IRS who are, again, you could try to make the argument that they're somewhat culpable because they're employed by the agency that he didn't like. But again, they're just doing their jobs. They don't really know what is going on as far as the taxes. They just know, look, you got to raise taxes in order to have a government, right? So they think it's necessary. They think that the IRS income tax, like most Americans do, they believe that even if you don't like it, you have to have it. If you don't, okay, it's unnecessary. But most people don't know that. And so if you kill somebody that's working for the IRS, you're really killing an innocent person who, in all likelihood, does not mean you any harm. And yet, and on top of that, you're not someone who grew up under a military occupation. You're an American who has more freedom than most people in the world have. Even now, after our government has become such a right-wing Looney Tunes organization, and even as it strips away all of our rights and all of our wealth, we're still better off than people in many other countries. It's just a sad fact. And so how could someone who comes from this country become a suicide bomber? It's just it's a question that we need to ask ourselves, and I think part of the reason is the fact that the right-wing hate groups have had a huge resurgence in the past year or so. Because of the economy, probably, there's a huge rise in hate organizations. That's something that we should probably be keeping our eyes on. So anyway, thanks for watching.